Sometimes I think that we can muddy up really good food with thinking that it has to have a ton of stuff in a recipe, when really, if you just start out with really good basic ingredients in the first place, you end up with something great in the end. Hey guys, welcome back to my kitchen. It is Friday, and every Friday I try really hard to spend a little bit of extra time in my kitchen just getting some stuff prepped and ready for the weekend. If you guys are anything like us, then you are probably gone a lot on the weekend. I am not a big fan of freezer meals, so that's not really a good option for us. I don't love the texture that a lot of things have once they have been frozen after they're cooked. And so we tend to stay away from those, and instead I will just spend a few hours one day a week making sure that we have plenty of things in our refrigerator. So today I am going to work on a few different things that we can use in our capsule. So the first thing that I'm going to work on is potato soup, and that means that I need to get my potatoes prepped and get some onions chopped and in some olive oil so that those can be kind of sweating and getting really delicious. All right, am I the only one that absolutely hates chopping onions? Okay, so now that I am crying all over the place, I am going to add my onions to some olive oil and get them sauteing until they are nice and translucent, and then I will move on to my next thing. So I'm just going to add some oil into my pot. The big jug of olive oil had to come out today. It was necessary for everything that I have going on. So I'm going to let that get warm for just a minute, and then I'm going to throw those onions in and start sweating them down. So I was going through my refrigerator grabbing some stuff out that I needed, and I found a leek, and it is starting to kind of get a little weird looking. So I know I don't have leeks on my, in my capsule, but I also didn't want this to go to waste. And this was a really good spot that I could use it. So I will say, even if you plan something like this out, and you find that you have things, it's always better to not waste it. You're always going to end up, wasting money if you're wasting food, right? So even though it's not in my capsule, I am going to go ahead and add one leek with that onion just because I happen to already have it. So I'm going to chop this up and then add that also. If you've never had leeks before, they have kind of a mild onion flavor. So they work really, really well in things like this. You just want to use the white and the light green parts. And then I will pull off any of these that are kind of starting to turn brown. So the inside ones that are nice and green, I will actually put these in the freezer. And whenever it's time for me to make chicken stock, I will add that in instead of onion. And it makes really, really yummy chicken stock. All right, and the next thing that I need to do is peel some potatoes. So for our family, that's usually 8 or so medium sized potatoes. So whatever that ends up being, I will peel them and wash them and chop them. I think potato soup is one of those things that pretty much every family has a recipe for. At least where I live, pretty much everyone has a recipe for. And a lot of families just really prefer their version of potato soup. And I think that that's so great. This is the one that my family likes, but you guys, you might like something totally different, and that's okay. But I've definitely found that potato soup recipes, for whatever reason here, can be very personal to people. All right, I am going to check on our onions and see how they're looking. Looking good, but not quite there yet, so I am going to finish peeling my potatoes and chopping them, and then we will move on to the next step. All right, my leeks and my onions look great, and it's time to add in my next ingredient, and that is some bone broth. So I'm going to add some chicken bone broth. I make and can my own. This is like the easiest thing ever. It seems like that's really impressive, but I promise it's not. So I am going to add 2 quarts of this. Obviously, you can use store-bought if you don't have it. You can use bouillon if you really want to, but bone broth is going to give you some added health benefits that you can't get from like bouillon or anything like that. So I am going to add that now, and then I'm going to add my potatoes to that. And then the last thing that I'm going to do right now is add some seasoning. So I'm going to add just some salt and pepper, and then I'm going to add some thyme to this. That's going to add just another level of flavor to it. And that is definitely one of those basic spices that I would always suggest having in your kitchen. So we're going to turn that heat up just a touch, and I'm going to cover it because I want there to be as little reduction in the liquid as possible, but I did reserve my chicken stock jar to just fill up with water and add if I need to add a little bit more liquid to it. All right, I cleaned up a little bit from that, just rinsed off my utensils that I'm using. And while that is coming to a boil and cooking those potatoes, I am going to get some chicken cooking. So if you just have shredded or chopped up chicken in your refrigerator, just grilled chicken, you can use that for so many things. We will have a salad night where we have a big salad, and I will use the chicken for that. And then there's another recipe that I am going to use the chicken for as well. So I am able to cook the chicken one time and get like 3 or 4 meals out of it. And that is going to save me a ton of time later, not just cooking, but it's also going to save me a ton of time cleaning up, because that means I only have to clean that pan one time. And I'm a big fan of that. Pan was wet when I put the oil in, which is like cooking 101. You're not supposed to do. So it is splattering everywhere. I just wanted to say that. I don't know if you can see my chicken, but whenever I am sauteing chicken in oil, I never pepper it until I'm almost done, because that pepper will burn, but the salt will season. So you want to avoid peppering it, just putting some salt on it. So I'm going to saute my chicken in some oil. I'm going to turn my temperature down really low. And then I'm going to put a lid on it. And then I'm going to be done with that chicken, and I am going to run and start some flatbread now. Okay, so I am going to show you guys how I make just a basic white bread recipe. We'll say I use this for everything. Today I'm going to use it for flatbread. And it is so versatile. I love it. I use it for cinnamon rolls and flatbread, obviously, for bread to have like for sandwiches, and then I use it for hot rolls too. Yeah, it's very versatile. I'm actually doubling the recipe today. So I'm going to start with 2 cups of water, just the hottest that you can get from the tap. I forgot my yeast. If you buy the yeast like in the little packets, then you're going to need probably 3 or 4 packets of that. I buy it in bulk. You can get it like Sam's, Costco has it. I buy mine from Azure Standard. So I'm going to throw in a little less than 2 tablespoons of yeast. Now, again, I am doubling this recipe because I want to have enough flatbreads for us to kind of get us through multiple meals. So I am doubling it. If you don't feel like that you need that many for your family, you can very easily half this recipe, and it will just make 6 flatbreads or 1 like loaf pan of bread as well. So that's 2 cups of hot water just from the tap, a little less than 2 tablespoons of yeast. And that yeast needs something to eat, and yeast lives off of sugar. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of honey. You could just add sugar to this. I made it for a really long time with just sugar, and it works great. I just prefer the flavor of. The next thing that you need is flour. I've made this with kamut. I've made this with einkorn. I've made this with all-purpose flour. I've made it with whole wheat. You just need 6 cups of. And then the last thing that you're going to add before you turn on your mixer is about 3/4 of a tablespoon of salt. If you don't have a stand mixer, this is a really great bread dough recipe to make by hand because it kneads really easily. But I am going to use my stand mixer today because it's just so much easier. So I'm just going to put the dough hook attachment on and turn it on and let it go for just a couple of minutes, and then I'll add the next ingredient. Okay, once everything kind of starts to mix together a little bit, then we are going to add a stick of softened butter to this. So now I'm going to turn it on probably about 2, and let it mix all together really well. And I'm going to see then if I need to add any more water or any more flour, and I'll show you how to check for that. All right, once your dough is really starting to come together, this isn't fully kneaded yet, it's still really slack looking, but once your dough is starting to come together, you'll notice at the bottom of your bowl whether everything is sticking really well, sticking too much, or there's still little bits of flour everywhere. I have found that if my dough is like coming up the side of the bowl and I can't get it to stay on my dough hook, that means I need a little bit more liquid in it. So I'm going to throw just maybe like 2 tablespoons at a time water in until I get a consistency where that dough is going to kind of stick to the bottom just a little bit. All right, this dough is done kneading for me. So I am going to pull it off of the dough hook. I'm going to cover it and I'm going to set it aside just in a warm spot in my kitchen until it doubles in. All right, I have my flatbread dough rising behind me. I have my potatoes boiling away. These look good, they smell good. I did kind of set the lid over to the side just a little bit so that they don't boil over. And I have my chicken cooking. So I am going to turn on all of this. I'm going to flip my chicken. And at this point, look at that. It is browned and looks good. At this point, I can start adding some pepper if I want to. I'm just going to let that finish cooking. And in the meantime, I'm going to clean up. So one thing that I have found is that anytime that I am doing like a big cook day like this, if I am really careful to make sure that I start with an empty dishwasher and a clean kitchen basically, and then just clean as I go along, at the end of the day, I am not full of dishes and mess and all of the things that make you hate cooking. And so I am going to put the lid back on this and do a quick clean of my kitchen. And then that way, when I am ready to move on to the next steps, I have everything at my disposal that I need and I don't have to work around any kind of mess. Okay, so my soup is good to go. I'm using a wooden utensil and then taking a piece of potato and just kind of smushing it up against the side, and if it mushes up, then you know you're ready to go. You have a couple of options at this point. You can either set it aside and let it cool and put it in your refrigerator or your freezer like this, but I am actually going to go ahead and blend mine up. So I'm just going to use an immersion blender, a stick blender. You can put this in any kind of a high-powered blender. You just want to be kind of careful with it because if you let it go for too long, it can get gummy. So that's why I prefer to use an immersion blender. But I'm just going to turn my heat off because I don't want it bubbling while I do this. And then I am going to blend it up really good. All of those pieces of potato will just kind of melt into that stock, and it's going to taste really yummy. And then the last thing that I am going to do is add a cup of heavy cream to this. That's about a cup. And then I'm going to mix this up, and it is good to go. You can eat it just like this right now. You can still see some chunks in there, which I really like. All right, so the potato soup is done. It is good to go. We could eat it right now if we wanted to, but I'm actually going to cool it down, and we are going to have it for dinner tomorrow night. But it is important to note that when you reheat it, the starch in the potatoes is going to really thicken that soup up. So I'm going to add a little bit of milk or water whenever I reheat it, just to give me that same soup consistency that I'm looking for. And serving it with a really good crusty bread is always a good move. But I like to serve it also with some cheddar cheese and some bacon bits. So that's how we're going to eat it for dinner tomorrow night. But we have one thing done. All right, the potato soup is done, and so is the chicken. So I am going to pull it out and let it rest before I try to chop it up. One thing that you're going to get from cooking chicken like this is what I feel like is a whole other ingredient, and that's those brown bits at the bottom. So I'm going to take advantage of that, and I'm going to go ahead and make a sauce for a pasta dish. So making pasta is always pretty simple. You're just boiling water and throwing the pasta in it. But if you're making a homemade sauce, that's the tricky part. And so I'm going to go ahead and make the sauce right now for dinner that we're going to have in a couple of days. And then whenever it comes time to actually make that dinner, all I have to do is boil the pasta and then heat the sauce up, and we'll be ready to go. And I've only gotten one dish dirty then. So I'm going to take this chicken out, let it rest, and then chop it up, and then go ahead and get a sauce started for a pasta dish in this same pan. All right, so I went ahead and added in a little bit of garlic. I still have oil in my pan, just a little garlic to these brown bits. I'm just going to stir them around just for 1 minute until they get fragrant. You do not want to burn that. That's about right now. And then I'm going to add just a bunch of cherry tomatoes that I've halved. And I'm going to stir that around in that garlic. And then this doesn't need to stay for very long. You can saute these for a minute if you really want to. I've done both ways. It really doesn't add a lot in the end for me. I'm going to add some salt. And then I'm going to pull out another quart of chicken stock. So I am going to add about 3/4 of this to my pan. You want to be kind of careful because that is hot oil and it can start to splatter. So, about that much is good. And then I'm going to turn my heat up quite a bit because I want this to boil and reduce. So I don't actually want the chicken stock to necessarily be the base of my sauce. It's going to be a cream-based sauce, but that chicken stock has such good flavor in it. And so I am going to concentrate that flavor quite a bit by putting all of the stuff that is in my pan in here and reducing it down, and that is going to give all of those flavors that are in there, it's just going to give it an extra punch. So I am going to let that go, and in the meantime, it's time to start working on my flatbread. All right, I have my flatbread dough. It's risen, and I am going to pull this out and separate it. Now, like I said, I doubled this recipe, so you're going to get 12. Sorry, I'm snacking on some of those cherry tomatoes. They're so good. I love tomato season. It's probably my favorite season of the whole year. So I'm going to flour this surface just a touch. And then I'm going to separate this into 12 pieces. So I'm just going to pat it out just like that. And then I'm just going to roll it. I go for the best circle that I can get. I am not a professional roller by any means. And I like to get a few going, just as many as I can get across my countertop at a time. So I'm going to get going on that. Okay, I have my pasta sauce boiling away. And if I hold my hand, it's super hot. So that's where I want it to be. I'm actually going to turn that down just a touch now. And I'm going to throw my first flatbread on there. As that cooks, you're going to start to see some bubbles forming, and that is good news. That's what you want. It's going to start to kind of puff up. That yeast in there is going to start cooking and rising. All right, I am finishing up the flatbread. I am almost done with those, and this sauce has reduced beautifully. You can see it started like way up here in the pan and how far down into the pan it has gone. So I am going to add the next ingredients to my sauce. So the first thing that I'm going to add is heavy whipping cream. I like to measure this with my soul, so I honestly have no idea how much of this I'm adding. I would guess between 2 and 3 cups because this is going to be a big pot of pasta for us. So I want to make sure and get plenty of sauce. While that is still cool, I am going to add shredded Parmesan cheese. Now it's really important that you add Parmesan cheese that you have shredded yourself. Do not buy the pre-shredded. It will definitely make this recipe kind of grainy. You don't want that. And then I'm going to add some of that chicken that we cooked and I chopped back in. And I have some fresh basil in my garden, so I'm going to add that. If I didn't have that, then while I was cooking the chicken stock down, I would add probably either some dried basil then, or Italian seasoning would work as well. And then that's it. That is all you need for this sauce. I'm actually going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to let it cool, and then I will stick this in the refrigerator just like that. And whenever it is time for us to make this pasta, I will boil my water and cook my pasta and reheat this sauce and then mix them together, and it is going to be so good. All right, that's it. I have been cooking for about 2 hours, which is not bad at all. And in the end, I ended up with 3 really good, hearty meals that are going to fill up my family, and that is what I'm always looking for. And so we ended up with a potato soup and the flatbread and the chicken that we can use either for salad and then have the flatbread with some butter on the side, or we can make chicken Caesar wraps, which are really good. And then we also ended up with a pasta dish. So we ended up with 3 different meals today, all using ingredients from my capsule for this month. And they are 3 very, very different meals. So they are full of flavor, but they're all full of really different flavors. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my capsule. And so far, I would definitely say so good. Our first Friday cook has gone really, really well, only using those 20 ingredients. So pretty excited about that. So that's what we were able to make this week. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.